Hey guys, my name is Jared and I'm here with James.
And my name is James, and I'm here with Jared.
Yeah, and this is Connection and Conviction, where we talk about real life, real questions, and real struggles. James, are you ready for today, bro?
Dude, I am not ready for today. And I think this is part of the problem. So we've been talking a while, and we get a ton of just questions about like how do we interact with like gay and trans people. And I
hmm
think there's so much tension around this topic, both because it's huge in our culture, because we as a church, and not just like Bethel Church, but I think like the whole church, which Bethel's included, that has
Yeah,
not done a great job at entering into this conversation.
no,
And
no,
so we get to dip our toe in today.
we do.
I hate you.
Why me? I feel like we came to a conclusion.
Nonsense. This is all you, and you forced me.
Because I think it is a good thing for us to talk about because we haven't talked about it
So
well.
good. It is.
Yeah. And so, what do you think is some of the issues that the church has run into when having this conversation?
Yeah. I think one of the big issues that the church has, that we have, that I have, is I've done more reading than I have interacting.
Mm,
And I think over the last season, and really ever since this really came into like the culture's public eye, is it's always been like an issue of ideology and not of people. And
mm,
so we treat people like walking ideologies, or we say we are against this concept, which then feels like we're against people who identify with that concept, which is just kind of like groupthink,
mm,
and labeling people in their group instead of as an individual,
mm.
which happens not just with gay,
Yeah.
trans, and LGBTQ. It happens everywhere.
Mhm.
But I think that's a huge issue that we run into, that it's like we no longer know how to interact with people because we're confused, or they're confused about gender or sexuality or identity, because we've wrapped them up into an ideology.
Yeah, it's almost like we don't see them as a human being that God created in his image, but we see them as whatever they think or believe about the world.
Yeah, yes, I would totally agree with you. And also, we often don't get to know people. And so what we do is we see someone has labeled themselves this way, like gay, trans, bi, furry, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And we go, okay, I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to get to know you. I know where you land on all the issues and all the stuff, and you and I aren't going to get along. And so I'm not going to talk to you about this
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
I already know you.
Mm.
And no, we don't. Like,
No. Yeah.
no, you don't. It's it's wrong to
Yeah.
just assume all that about a person,
Mhm.
and yet, like, as Christians, we so often do this. As people, we so often do this, and it's painful, and it causes a lot of pain, and
Mm.
I think it's a huge issue in the church.
Yeah.
So,
How do you think we could better go around these conversations?
so can I get the Sunday school answer? The Sunday
You
school
can.
answer is like, just treat people like Jesus treated people,
Mm,
and we don't do that.
mm,
I don't know, more and more been convicted of like we are educated far beyond our obedience, and like we know God's command is to love God and love others, and sometimes we try and love God. We rarely genuinely try and love others.
mm,
Or we go, you know what, I'm gonna love people, I'm gonna talk with people, I'm gonna get along with people who think like me. And like if that's what we do, not only is there verses that say we shouldn't do that, but Jesus models to us that that's not how he treats us. Like if God is only going to talk with people that fully agree with God all the time, like he's only talking to himself, and we're out of the mix.
Yep.
Bummer. And yet like there's such tenderness and care and development that happens, that that breaks my heart in both like my past behavior,
Mm,
um and also I think how we have gone about treating people who are different than us,
mm,
um both in like silencing voices and not being interested in it.
mm.
But I don't know. Do you have much experience in this? Do you? I mean,
I mean, I think it's the same as anyone. I have experience where I didn't know what I was supposed to say, and
mm,
I had a Christian culture telling me like what they're doing is completely wrong.
mm,
And so I feel like I've had so many instances where I've treated those that believe and act differently than me like they're less than or they don't have a place.
Yeah.
And as I've come to understand more and more of Jesus's heart, I'm like, man, I'm like, Lord, forgive me for the ways that I've treated your children that are people. And then as I see Jesus interacting with broken people, he comes with such love and grace and he meets them where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm just figuring out like how do we do that, or even not how, because I think we know how.
hmm
Like you just ask questions. You be genuinely curious about other
hmm
people and their stories and their life, and you treat people like more than sexuality.
Yeah.
Like I've been married for 12 years. Not every time I interact with people do they ask me about my marriage or the
hmm
intricacies of my sexuality.
Yeah.
It'd be really weird if people kept asking if that was the only thing they asked about me. I'm like, we're not friends. Stop. You're creeping me out. Um, but it's this, can we be genuinely curious about people who think different than us
Yeah.
or than Christians? And even like this is a broader issue. It's most lived out in LGBTQ stuff and the way that
hmm
Christians interact with LGBTQ, but it's also with each other.
Yeah.
Like we just stopped being curious about each other,
mm
um, and just I don't know. I think I've become arrogant in it,
mm
and so there's been some pretty big repentance in my life
Yeah.
around that. So
Yeah, I like that point that people are so much more than their sexuality. That you can dig in and be like, what are you passionate about? What do you love? Like, what is it that's going on in your life right now? And ask genuine questions
mm,
and interact with them like they're another person, like they're one of your friends. Because most of the time, they probably are one of your friends or an acquaintance at least.
yeah,
And so being like, dude, you're a human, I'm a human. Let's connect about human things.
yeah. What I have heard is like, okay, cool. So I've done that, and I've asked, hey, like, what are you passionate about? And they're
hmm
like, and then someone's answer is like, I'm a I'm passionate about gay rights.
mm
And it's like, oh well, what'd you do this weekend? Like, oh, I went to a pride festival.
mm
Like, oh, and then it's all of a sudden like this, like, oh, what do I say next?
mm.
I don't know.
What do you
How
think?
did it
Yeah.
go? Like if anyone else went to a festival of any other kind, like you'd ask, how did it go? Did you make new friends? What happened there?
Mm,
Especially for those of us in Tri Cities have probably never been to a pride festival. Like, what happens at a pride festival? Figure
mm,
that out. Like, ask more about it. And I think sometimes we think because I'm asking questions or getting to know someone, that means that I'm like fully approving of everything that they do. And
mm,
that's not true at all. Like Jesus continually asks questions and continually engages with those who live very different lifestyles from how Jesus instructs and the lifestyle that Jesus lived, and yet still shows like care and compassion and interest in them,
mm,
which again is back to this whole thing of like we're just maybe bad at asking questions or bad at being curious
mm,
because we think, well, this will mean something to someone else. Yeah, it means that we're actually trying to be caring and loving,
mm.
and that's what Christians should be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and in the conversation of being caring and loving, I have a final question I want us to talk about is when someone is introducing themselves to us with pronouns that are not the ones they were given at birth, how do you think we should interact with that and go about that?
So here's where I've landed, and this has been a big journey in my life. I don't know a lot of trans people here. I knew a couple in Olympia and interacting. I call people how they introduce themselves to me.
Mm,
So if it's biological female and he calls himself Kyle,
mm-hmm,
I'll call him Kyle.
mm,
And I'll try and get that like the name right so that I can call them by their name. Um, and what is tricky is when someone like is biologically Samantha, and you've gone to school with them and they've been Samantha, and then all of a sudden they hit freshman year and it's like, no, I'm Samuel, but you're Samantha.
mm,
I'm landing in a place where I think it's important to care for people where they are.
mm-hmm,
And if they're in a place where it's like, hey, you have severe gender dysphoria, then it's not the worst thing in the world for me to call you Samuel and to continue to build friendship.
mm,
That the gospel and change in life doesn't always happen overnight.
Mhm.
In fact, rarely does it happen overnight. And so to journey and to walk through and to ensure that like the love and care and friendship that we show to others is not solely dependent on their decisions, but on our calling and mission and ministry of reconciliation
Mm.
rather than their decision to be reconciled to God. So
That's a good word.
that's where I'm landing.
That's cool, man.
We'll see if it changes. But today, that's where I'm at. Where are you at with that?
Man, I feel like I'm in a similar place.
Okay.
We've been talking for a long time,
We
so I
have
kind
been.
of want to wrap it up. But dude, I feel like there's so much here in treating people with like love and respect and with humanity
Yeah.
and coming at them with the love of Jesus is such a cool thing. So, dude, thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you guys for joining in on this difficult conversation. Um, this has been Connection and Conviction. We'll catch you guys next time.